On today's episode of the Utah High School Hoops podcast, I am joined by a very special guest. If you're on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it's called these days, hopefully you are following Brandon with his work with JUCO Advocate and also with his work with Verbal Commits. We're going to get into all of that here on the show. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Utah High School Hoops podcast, your source for sometimes informative, but always entertaining coverage of the Utah High School hoop scene. With your host, Adam Peak. Hey, everybody. I am thankful to be joined here by Brandon. And Brandon, I told you before we got on, I dusted off my old letter jacket. 25 years. I think it's my 25-year anniversary. And there's a good reason why I had to wear my Lewis Palmer letter jacket. And that's because I found out that we went to rival high schools and potentially played against each other.
You know, just typical of somebody from Lewis Palmer not to communicate with me that this is what we were going to do. I could have gone into the garage and dug through one of the many boxes to find my old letter jacket. And, we'd have turned it into a real rivalry today. But, it's fine. It's fine.
I don't know. Are they still rivals, Liberty and Lewis Palmer? I don't even know.
I think there's like 6 new schools that have been built between the two now. So it's like, becoming harder. I think Pine Creek kind of became our rival because basically Pine Creek was opened by taking half of our school's students.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's still a thing or not.
I don't know. Here's what I remember. By the way, this is Brandon Goble, and you're going to get into your introduction here. But we're going to cover the really hard-hitting things that everybody tunes in for, which is high school basketball, Colorado Springs, late 90s, early 2000s. And I once lost a bet in college. So I was at Colorado State, and it was March Madness. And Gonzaga was playing Wyoming. And I was like, I played against this kid at Wyoming, who's playing for Wyoming, Dante Richardson. I was like, I had to guard him. He's pretty good, but like I'm 5'10", and I'm like he didn't score a whole lot on me. And so I picked Gonzaga. I was like, there's no way Wyoming is gonna beat Gonzaga. They were like a 6 seed and 11 seed. And your guy, Liberty's finest, Dante Richardson, just lit up Gonzaga. And
pretty good.
And he did the same thing at Colorado State that year, and I was like, man,
it was the only year that we won state. We had Dante Richardson. He went to, I think, Sheridan Junior College and then Wyoming.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that's hot. These leather jackets these things are like,
yeah, dude, they have leather sleeves and they're made out of
warm. These are gotta bust that thing out in the winter out here in Utah, man. Whew. Oh, that's crazy, actually. I have a pin. Sorry, hang on 1 second. I literally haven't looked at this thing. So this pin that's on my letter jacket was because in '99, when I was a senior, was when the Columbine shooting went down. And so we all had these Columbine pins. That's crazy. That's a 25-year-old pin right there. I didn't even know it was on my letter jacket.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Well, anyway, yeah. So that was a fun kind of small world moment when I found out that we went to high school in the same kind of region. But I figured beyond that, because that's like probably the least interesting thing about yourself. Why don't you do a quick introduction on who you are, and for those people who don't know you or don't follow you yet?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of a company called Player Advocate LLC. The two brands under that people would probably recognize are either JUCO Advocate or, to a larger scale, Verbal Commits. So we have our social spaces for both of those brands. JUCO Advocate has over time kind of evolved and morphed into a little bit more of like a personal project that still has business use to it, but Verbal Commits really kind of our flagship brand with the website verbalcommits.com, and then what we do on the socials with that as well.
That's awesome. And how did you just like stumble upon this, or was this something that you were passionate about, or how did you get into starting a business and getting focused on player advocacy around, both the verbal commits and then also the JUCO advocacy?
It was kind of a weird way to find it. So, as you said, I went to Liberty, and I was uh, really not a big basketball guy, back then. And then I went on to Colorado State, got more into it a little bit up there, but still
Wait,
not.
I did not know that you were a CSU Ram.
Oh yeah, yeah, class
How
of
did I miss that part?
'05. Yeah, class of 2005.
Alright,
So
I have an autographed Bradley Van Pelt jersey that hangs in
me
my
too.
house.
Yep. Also same.
We have matching sunshine jerseys, that's great.
Matching
That's funny.
sunshine jerseys. Yep.
We're no longer rivals, we are Ram. And by the way, CSU is playing incredible. It's been fun to watch their team this year. Go Rams.
And
Alright, anyway,
back then we had Dale Layer,
yeah,
and Jason Smith was playing, and kind of watching Jason play a little bit, kind of maybe got the juices flowing for it. Making the NCAA tournament, playing in that game against Duke, but it still just like wasn't something that was like a real passion for me. And so my wife was going to vet school up here, and so
which is one of the
what?
best vet schools in the country for
Yeah,
everybody who's listening. You should
yes.
send your kids to Colorado State for veterinary school.
So we got married, and she was so busy that like I didn't ever see her for 3 or 4 years, and so that's kind of when I started getting a little bit more into it, a little bit more into it, and then I was in the corporate world, and just really didn't have the time to like focus on it in the way that I wanted to. And then eventually, as I got further into that corporate job, and finally just was like, hey, I need to do something different with my brain, other than my job every day. And so I really got into the analytics side of things. Basketball on paper had come out, and so I was reading kind of more into the math side of stuff, deeper analytics. Ken Palm was out, but wasn't what it is today. And so I started, from a CSU fan account, basketball fan account, tweeting about analytics around Colorado State basketball. And some of the staff saw it and asked me to come in and do some analytics things with them, and talk to them about some stuff or whatever. And that's really kind of what like fired up the engines for me with really really getting into basketball. But the interesting thing was is I got into it at first from a math standpoint.
Mm,
I was fascinated with different logarithms and algorithms and things that you would do to project basketball. So through that, I met a guy that wanted to walk on to the Colorado State team, and Coach Eustace wasn't into walk-ons ever.
no, so
And this was
post
post
layer,
Dale,
and
yeah, and
wasn't,
post Tim.
post
Yep,
10, yeah. Is he
yeah.
still
So
at
this
Nebraska, by the way?
no, he's at San Jose.
Oh,
Yep.
that's right, Tim Miles, San Jose State. Go Spartans.
So um, he wasn't into the walk-on. So I talked to the kid, talked to a couple buddies that I had that had played on the team before and had now graduated. And I said, well, I watch a lot of basketball by this point, right? And I said, you look pretty good, but you know, let me see what I can do. And what was unique about him is he had been in the Air Force for 6 years after high school. So that stops your clock. Your NCAA clock stops when you go into the military. So he was a combat veteran and had
Hmm,
gotten out. He was 24 years old, trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And I was like, look, man, I'll work you out. I'll film you. I've got a buddy down at Midland Community College that was the video coordinator at Colorado State and then had gone down there as an assistant. He was literally the only person in basketball that I knew at that point outside of the coaches at Colorado State.
who is that, by
Um,
the way?
Sam Winooski,
Okay, I didn't know.
who is now at Southern Arkansas Community College. I always forget which one it is. He's going to be the new head women's coach. But
Cool.
um, so he was down there at Midland with Jordan Dreiling, and so I sent the film down, and he's like, "Look, you know, this is the Whack Jack. This is the best league in the country for junior college." And I'm like, "What's a junior college back then?" And he says, "But we'll take him as a walk on." So Solomon used his GI Bill to pay for his tuition stuff, and he goes down and he ends up being a starter for him. He was a qualifier, so he only ended up going 1 year. And he says, "Hey, can you help me with my recruitment?" And I was like, "Sure." I don't I don't know what that means, but whatever. Let's go nuts. So from that personal account, I took all of his film. This was my first time like ever editing film. Um, I didn't even have Synergy access at the time. And I don't even know if they would have been on Synergy back then. So I was taking full games and like hand clipping out every game he played, every clip he did. And I would send it via Twitter to every coach in the country. Like I would do at, whatever the coach, and then I'd put a little blurb about, this is a Air Force veteran, and he's averaging 8 and 6 or whatever it was at Midland, and blah blah blah. And then I would watch, because like if there was engagement with the tweet, as far as like watching the film, I figured that was probably the coach watching it, because I was doing it directly at. So, they were really the only ones seeing it. It wasn't popping up on my timeline unless you went to replies.
Mhm.
So if they interacted, then I'd post another one and another one and another one, like in replies, and then all of a sudden I'd get a DM from the coaches that says, "Hey, who the hell are you? Uh, what's this kid's story?" And so that kind of like started all that, and I was like, "Oh my god, what an exhausting process, to go
Right.
through this whole thing." I sent like I went back and did a count on it based on the verbiage that I would use, and it was something like 3,200 tweets that I sent
Jeez. For
on this
one
kid.
for one player?
For one guy, for one guy,
Goodness
and
gracious.
he ended up going to Evansville, then grad transferred to UTRGV, had a great career, and still talk to him to this day. I mean, this by now, this was, gosh, I mean, we're coming up on a decade ago, I guess, at this point.
Wow.
And so when I finished that, then his teammates started hitting me up, and they said, "Hey, can you help?" And there was some other people that I had reached out to through this process, including Nathan LeClaire, who runs the day to day of verbal commits. Like back then, I was like, "Hey, can you post that this school is offered Solomon and whatever?" And he would do that thing. Um, and there were some other people like Daniel Poneman that was, I think back then he was like a music agent, and he but he was still in basketball, and so he posted some stuff. It was just kind of like he just happened to check this like random DM from me, and so Solomon got taken care of. Well, then his teammates started hitting me. So now I'm posting about his teammates, on Twitter, and then more kids from other schools, because they're like, "Well, hey, who's this guy that's sending your stuff out?" And they're like, "Oh, it's this guy." And all of a sudden, I was like, "All right, well, you know what? Maybe I'm just gonna like make a hobby out of this."
Right.
I enjoy the interactions. By this point, I've got 100 Division 1 coaches' cell phone numbers, and think I'm just big stuff at this point. And so created JUCO Advocate initially just as a Twitter handle to help kids get recruited, and then um, at some point kind of figured like, hey, we really need to kind of formalize this more, and started talking to some of those people that I had gotten to know through the Solomon recruiting process, and said, maybe we should make a website. And one of my best friends that is with us now is our chief technology officer, is somebody that I knew back then from doing some other online business stuff. And so he built this website, and it just kind of like just like exploded.
That's
And
amazing.
in a fairly short period of time. Now, all the while, I'm still working in the corporate world, um,
Okay,
which
so you hadn't transitioned full time over to player advocate or JUCO advocate or what any of this.
no, no.
Okay.
And I loved my direct boss. My direct report in my corporate job was awesome. She was fantastic, but she would probably tell you that I would imagine my performance reviews started to reflect
Hmm.
the fact that I had this other thing that I was really passionate about. And it's funny because the day that I quit, uh, she was super happy that like I was going to go do the thing that that,
Right.
that I was really into. But so we started this website, and there wasn't like really a plan. It was like, hey, this is cool and this is fun, and we want to help a bunch of kids, and whatever. And it really just kind of exploded. I mean, all of a sudden, within a super short period of time, we had 10,000 Twitter followers, then 20,000 Twitter followers. And I said, well, let's start a scouting service. So we did that, and that took off pretty quickly. I said, let's do a team jamboree, the Region 9, the junior college thing. It was really small, and some of the guys were complaining they wanted it to be bigger. So in the first year that we did a jamboree, I want to say we had like 52 teams come from
Hmm.
all over the country to play in this thing, and I was like, oh my gosh! And we didn't even know what we were doing. I mean, it was
Yeah.
literally like, oh my gosh, all hands on deck. How do we even do this? So we did that, and we started J48, and I said, what'd be cool is like we don't have a McDonald's All American type event in junior college. Let's do that. And now that's, you'd be hard pressed to argue that that's not the kind of the premier event in junior college space.
And is that
Um,
is that the event that runs simultaneous with, is it the next
yeah,
and the Pro 16
yeah.
events?
So last year was our first time running with them, and
Okay.
then we've re-upped that now with Puma as the sponsor.
Yep.
And I think it's going to continue to grow. It's a lot of fun. We got some cool stuff we're doing this year,
And
specifically with
can
Puma.
I wanna hang out here real quick
Yeah,
on this because I'm actually not super familiar with it. So, is this an event where teams come in, or you select kind of the top players, and they come in and they have, like, more of a showcase event
yeah.
during a live period so that the D1 coaches can come in, and is that kinda how it
Yeah,
works?
yeah, typically these exposure events are, lots of courts, a couple hundred players, coaches are walking around all over. I really wanted to focus in on the top talent. We do a ton of work with everybody, but I wanted junior college to have something that was kind of like, the jewel event that people um, that really drew a lot of exposure to these kids. And so it's just 48 players, individual invite only. We play on a single court, so it's not, multiple games going at once. It's one game, and a couple hundred Division 1 coaches just sit in a rectangle.
Yeah,
All the baselines, all the sidelines are just completely filled with Division 1 coaches, and it's super fun.
I love that, man.
We've had lots of, multiple, I don't know, 5 or 6 NBA players now that have played in the event over time, and it's just continuing to grow. And this relationship with Puma and Next Pro, I think, is going to take it to another level this year.
Did
So
our we have a mutual fandom for our guy Dalton out at Tennessee,
yep,
Colorado. The next great Colorado player we've had who. So Pat Garrity grew up on my street. Um it's true. We grew up on the same street. Reggie Jackson, Chauncey, who else am I missing that came out of Colorado? My Colorado high school basketball history is lacking, but I'm guessing
yeah,
Dalton's a projected lottery pick at this
yeah,
point, so
yeah. I
how
mean,
do you
he's
say his
he's
last
going to
name, by
be.
the way? I had Coach Danny Sprinkle on from Utah State, and he said "Connect," and I was like, "Oh, no, I thought it was necked. I thought the K was silent."
It's like so it's the German. He's German, right?
Okay,
And so it's the K. I think is technically silent. I
got it.
think there's a little bit of a k in there, but not like a connect. You know?
Yeah. Da 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 da, connect four, not which
Yeah,
should
it's
play if
not.
he ever gets a 4-point play. Um,
Oh man, we gotta make that shirt. Anyways, um,
you're welcome. I'll take I'll take 10% royalties. Uh but did he play in the JA-48?
he was the COVID year. He was invited,
Oh,
and
dang it.
I mean, the COVID year was loaded. Tyon Grant Foster, who's at Grand Canyon, will he'll there's a good chance he gets drafted this
Yep.
year. That COVID year was, but didn't happen.
Yeah,
So
my sister was gonna go watch the Grand Canyon Weber State no, UVU game,
mhm,
and then, we got hit with kind of a weird snowstorm, and she couldn't make it down, because
yeah.
she wanted to go check him out at Grand Canyon, so,
Yeah,
that's
Tyon's
cool.
another great story down there. So yeah, we started doing these events, and we started doing the scouting service and all this sort of stuff. And then at the Minneapolis Final Four, which was 4 years ago, I think. Um, I met with Nathan LeClaire, who was the owner and operator, co-owner and operator of Verbal Commits, and he was just buying out his partner to kind of take that thing entirely. And so I met with him, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, we need to get together. I think we can do something special." And he agreed. And so, since then, that both Verbal Commits, JUCO Advocate have operated under, our parent company now. And for the last 4 years, we've been putting a lot into Verbal Commits because it initially was just built as like a passion project.
Mhm.
Um, the guy that originally built it is the one that sold it to Nathan, but Nathan kind of jumped in early and said, "Hey, this site's cool, but like you're not updating your data. I like data, and I'm a college student, and I got nothing better to do on a Friday night but update, who's on the roster at St. Francis Brooklyn basketball. So, can I help and whatever?" And then he became an equity holder
Hmm.
with the guy of the company as it then grew into a business.
Got it.
And so he took that, but it was built on old technology, and it was never really like intended to be a thing, and then it became a thing. you know Nathan basically single-handedly turned that into the most informative, accurate, and popular recruiting platform for college basketball. um, because he covered everybody. If you
Mhm.
went to Alcorn State, you got as much coverage as if you went to Duke.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. And so I said, I think there's some really cool things that we can do with this. And so for the last 4 years, we've been doing a lot of rebuilding in house. Um, one of our kind of core goals has always been to maintain control of our company.
Yeah.
And so, VC money and stuff like that just hasn't interested us because we want to be in control. We want to be able to make the decisions. We want to be able to help the people that we want to help. And so we've put a lot into that VC. And here coming soon, people have probably seen me tease some things out from Verbal Commits about what's coming.
Cool.
But we've got a whole new platform coming out that the goal of which is to take like everything that we do from a help standpoint and just send it out into a different stratosphere. And
Well,
here
here,
we
how
are.
about we do this, Brandon? We're gonna take a quick break and hear from my wonderful sponsor, Ruvi. And when we come back, I wanna dig in a little bit more, not only into verbal commits, but also into to JUCO basketball and kind of what has changed. And I'm guessing it's a lot over the last, call it 4 or 5 years relative to JUCO basketball. It's near and dear to people here in Utah because we've got Salt Lake Community College, we've got Slick, we've got Snow, and CSI is College of Southern Idaho is right around here. So there's a lot of kids, I think, in Utah. We don't have to talk about those teams specifically, but just the general idea of the path the path in basketball and the role that that a junior college is going to have for a lot of players. And so I'd love to kind of pick your brain a little bit on that and get your thoughts if you're cool with that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll be back on the other side of the break with Brandon Goble of JUCO Advocate and Verbal Commits.
How the heck are you supposed to eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day? And as a mom, I think I figured it out. Ruby. Ruby is the only way. Open, pour, shake, drink. My kids love Ruby because it tastes so good. And when in your life are you going to get this many fruits and vegetables in just one serving? Like I get to eat my McKee berry. Trust me on this one. Try it once and you will not regret it. Your kids won't even complain that they have to drink it. It's that good.
And you won't regret going to goruvi.com and using code Adam15 to get 15% off your purchase. That's goruvi, GORUVI.com, and use code Adam15 for 15% off your purchase. All right, we're back here with Brandon Goble of JUCO Advocate, Verbal Commits, and you said it's Player Advocate LLC. Is that the
That's it.
official? Okay, I got it all. And most importantly, graduate of the Colorado State University, the Harvard of the Rockies. By the way, that 02-03 team that played Duke, that had the run and through the Mountain West tournament with gosh, who Matt Nelson
Yep.
and Andy Burley. Who else is on that team? Um, Ronnie Gray.
Yeah, I forget the little guard's name.
There was the kid from Fruita Monument, John Krakowski. Well, no, I can't remember. Ah, shoot. Anyway, I was like a student
It's almost
manager.
if like that was 2 decades ago.
Oh my gosh. But I was a student manager and, like, practice player on that team, so I got to be around
Oh,
that
wow.
whole crew, and Buzz Williams was one of the assistant coaches at the time,
Yes, he
so
was.
I've been
Yep.
able to keep in touch with Buzz. He did not know my name, he called me, Cliff, because I was in the office on 9/11/2001. I was in the basketball office just watching TV silent like everyone was. We were putting
Yeah.
together different recruiting packets and stuff to help send out. And I just say, like, I kind of just break the ice. And I said, did you know that before Azerbaijan became a country, Afghanistan was the only country whose name started with an A that did not end with an A? And I just said it for some reason. And Buzz just goes, my boy's like Cliff Clavin over here from Cheers. And I was like, and he just called me Cliff the whole season. Never knew my name, just called me Cliff. So I still get to remind him of that whenever I've gotten to connect up with him a few times. And then
I'll
also,
text Buzz later and say I talked to Cliff this morning.
he won't
He'll be like,
he
"What the hell?"
I don't know that he'll know. Well, because my sister goes down to his practices a lot, so
Mhm.
he may remember it now. But also, Blake Flickner at Dallas Baptist he was doing his graduate work there, and I got to
Yeah.
see Blake the end of last year. Went to DBU and saw the campus, a beautiful campus. Anyways, that's, I guess, maybe mildly important. But I would, like I said, kind of before the break, I would really love for you to talk about. You spend so much time now helping players, and you've been building out this whole platform that is really, service, a tremendous service, I think, to a lot of players. I loved hearing the genesis story of how you're just like, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kept doing stuff,
Right.
which is sort of how I have built an entire career as well, just not in basketball. Just like, I don't know, that sounds good. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
that sounds whatever. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
whatever. Um, and eventually you end up in Dubai meeting at the
Right.
United Nations summit
If
with
you act like you know what you're talking about hard enough, eventually it looks like you know what you're talking about. So,
eventually you learn to know what you're talking about.
right.
So I want to talk about JUCO basketball because I think it's become a really critical path forward. And I tell kids here whenever I hear this nonsense of like, oh, I guess my fallback plan is slick. And I'm like, that there's like 8 Division I players on that roster, right? Like,
At minimum, yeah.
that's not, yeah, minimum. That's not like a fallback plan. That's like, holy crap, you're gonna play it slick? Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Um, has that always been that way, or has the transfer portal and, kind of that I'm sure you could talk for a long time about the player advocacy around, player movement and things of that nature. I know I've followed a little bit on Twitter, but has it always kind of been this way, or has the transfer portal and coupled with like the COVID years and coupled with, NIL money, has that really impacted the JUCO ranks?
Yeah, it's interesting because, obviously my experience really started with junior college 10 years ago. But I was fortunate to, go through this process with Solomon because I got to see right away, like what junior college can be, what it can do for people, as well as, the light, the dark, the every, shades of gray in between, both with the players and the towns. And, there's just junior college is such a unique, interesting space that there's really nothing else like it. But I wasn't around for the late 90s junior college in the early 2000s where basketball was different back then with, qualifying and, all this sort of stuff. You got a lot of people talk about the good old days of, junior college and, some of these players. And there's, thoughts here and there that like junior college isn't as good as it was. And, there's probably some uh truth to some of those thoughts in that like this day and age, like if you're an NBA player out of the gate, out of high school, you're probably not going to wind up in junior college because somebody's going to figure out how to get you eligible, get you qualified, all that sort of thing. That wasn't really the case back then. You know,
Yeah.
we had guys where in high school they were like, oh, that's an NBA player, but he has to go junior college. Now
Would this be like I'm trying to think of like Jimmy Butler or like Chris Anderson? I can't remember. Did Dennis Rodman? I know he started out. I think he started
he
out.
was a JUCO guy. Yeah, I forget the name of the school because it doesn't have a team anymore. But Steve Francis
Oh yeah.
and the Matrix. Sean Marion. These were guys that would have you know like Jimmy Butler was a little different story because he wasn't like super heralded out of high school. But some of these other guys, they were, but they had to go. Um, there's still plenty of kids that have to go junior college, but it's changed a little bit where now it's either they just need more time to develop, they were under recruited. Um, there's a lot more of that. So what's interesting about it, and we're always talking about it in the context of Division 1 basketball, which is not the most important thing, but
Mhm.
it does at least give everybody a contextual starting point, I think. Where, I think there's the talent has actually improved in the last 5 years overall, but it's gone like this, as opposed to like the
That makes
floor
sense.
is higher, but the ceiling is also a little bit lower.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
there's a lot more like in that middle area. I mean, literally hundreds of players that can play kind of that higher end of low major to the upper end of mid major basketball. And so it's been interesting because there's a lot more qualifiers that are going to JUCO now because the portal has prevented them from getting recruited out of high school. Whereas in the past, somebody like LeBron Thomas at Vincennes, who, if he comes back next year, he'll be an All American, maybe the number one player in the country, definitely a J48 invite. Uh, but his recruitment will be bonkers. But like he was really good out of high school, just 5 years ago, like he probably would have gotten two or three at least low major Division 1 offers, and now just not.
Mm.
So, that has happened a lot for sure. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting going forward. I think there are some things that make junior college much more appealing now. There are some things that will ding it a little bit because the portal stuff, especially if the portal becomes a transfer as many times as you want sort of situation.
Right.
And there are other coaches that are looking at it saying like, "Hey, what we don't have? NIL. So I can't go get the transfer player that I want because somebody that does have NIL, I can't beat them. So I'm going to go recruit the best junior college players now." And so I think the people that kind of recognize that and have put the effort into that are going to really reap the benefits. But Noah Boyd signed with Baylor early. Baylor doesn't need to recruit junior college players. Baylor likes to recruit junior college players.
Right.
Scott Drew's done a phenomenal job with them. John Jacobs, who's the associate head coach there, who's fantastic, came from Gonzaga, and were places they didn't recruit junior college, and he loves junior college players now at Baylor. Um, so, it's really all over the map. Buzz Williams wants to have a JUCO guy on his team every year. He doesn't always get one because he is very picky about it. You have to be the right guy to play for Buzz. But like the last one that was a J48 guy that Buzz came to J48 and saw was Quentin Jackson,
Mm.
who's in the NBA
Yeah.
off and on right now between the Windy City Bulls and the Bulls. Um, and so, even guys like that, recognize that talent, recognize what those players can be, even though they're coming from, junior college. Um,
I feel like there's a character refining that also really happens. Like I don't talk to a lot of high school basketball players. I get to talk to a few of them, right, who want to
right.
go and they want to play in college, and I'll say to them, well, what and most importantly also to their parents, it's like, but what are you going to do that a coach whose job is on the line most of the time, year after year, is going to take a chance on you versus a 20, 21, 20-year-old, physically mature, been through the grind, has been working out and playing in, whatever small city in Kansas, and is 6'6", 215, and has 2 years, maybe even 3 years of eligibility left, like, and they're kinda like, "Oh,
Yeah. I mean,
okay."
I always kind of explain it to coaches and, to parents and stuff is I say, I'm just trying to think of an example here. Well, let's look at that's not a great example because he's a return missionary. Well, it's Max Triplett at Snow, right? Max Triplett is a great player. He's a great human being. He's you know gonna get a lot of recruitment this year. Um, that dude is 6'9", 240 pounds of man muscle with skill and everything else. And I tell the coaches, I say, well, you're not sure if you want to recruit him, but you're recruiting some of these other high school kids. What do you think Max Triplett would do in AAU this spring? And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I was like, if he played AAU this spring, Kentucky would recruit him because he'd be, knocking the heads off of everybody.
Right.
Well, he's not a high school player. That's why he's not playing AAU. But I'm just saying, if you're gonna look at this guy and not look at this guy because he's in junior college, I think you're making a pretty significant error here, And the thought way back when was like, well, he's only got 2 years left or maybe 3 years left. I also tell him if the difference between 3 years and 4 years anymore, like, doesn't matter.
No.
And in this day and age, how many guys are staying for 4 years either?
Right.
You know. So the idea of taking a 22-year-old super experienced, um, physically, I mean, the amount of change between an 18-year-old and a 21, 22-year-old is bonkers, right?
Yep.
And so, that's where I think junior college is not only going to be just fine, but it's going to thrive and actually grow. Is that coaches are going to start telling high school kids, "Hey, we got these portal guys that we're recruiting. We're recruiting junior college players. I can't. You're not going to play for me next year. Ergo, I can't take you.
Yeah.
Go to junior college and we'll talk next year."
Yeah, go
And
there,
that's already
play,
happening.
right? You can get I mean, there's probably even players out there, if you even just think of, like, the cost of going to a junior college,
Oh yeah,
that they wouldn't even need a scholarship, right? Like, I mean,
right.
it's so you can go, you can play, you can, be on the team, you can be in the weight room, you can be around other D1 kids. I mean, I love what you do because I think just naturally I'm an advocate for any path forward for a kid who is trying to pursue their dreams, and they should never, ever, ever, ever say, like, "This is the only path," especially now. I'm just like, start it early, cast a wide net, be open to any possibility, and say, like, "This is my dream no matter what." It can't
Right.
just be like, "This is my dream, but I have to go to the University of Utah and play basketball as a freshman." It's like, it's gonna be tough.
Tough
That's
ask,
gonna be a
guys.
tough
Tough
one.
ask. There's a lot of really, really good freshmen that are coming over from, other countries or are even being recruited here domestically that aren't playing
Mhm.
because they show up, and as good as they were, the guys, are just way more experienced and older and, uh, physically built and, in a way that they're just not ready for, and that's not a knock on them. They
Right.
can become that, but schools are less interested in that happening at their school, you
Yeah.
know? It's weird. I don't know. I can't say if it's good, bad, or otherwise that, this is where we are now, with some of this, but,
But it's just where it is. I mean, that's
it's just where it is. So you just got to figure it out,
yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
Brandon, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, sharing about what you're doing. I'm a fan of what you're doing. I'm happy to support and send some people over there. So, how do people get involved with either JUCO Advocate, or I guess even more? It's probably easier for people to get involved with, like, with verbal commits and some of the things that you have going there. So, just
yeah,
tell us a little bit about that.
on JUCO Advocate, give us a follow. We do a lot of things all over the world. We do charity camps all over the world. We do charity camps here in the United States. We still do a lot of hands-on help, in that space and everything. And then, yeah, verbal commits, like I said, kind of a little new evolution of the Twilight Zone coming for that. So stay tuned for that here in the next week or two. And hopefully that will give a lot more opportunities to people to kind of really get involved and take control of a lot of their own recruitment, with us there to help and support. And so yeah, just keep watching. We're working hard and coming up with new crazy things to do, and we're not going to stop anytime soon.
That's awesome. Well, Brandon, I really appreciate you coming on. I will make sure that all the links are down in the show notes. And so if you just want to click on it, you can give them a follow. You can head on over to the Verbal Commit site. You can do all of it very easily because, like I said in my last episode, you all have the attention spans of goldfish. And so I want to make sure things are quick and easy for you. I do encourage high school students to consume long form content, watch full games, watch entire movies, keep your phone away. It's healthy for your brain to not just be constantly stimulated. So, Brandon, thanks so much for coming on. I'm glad to know
Yeah.
that we could set aside our rivalry from high school, unite under the banner of the CSU Rams. But most importantly, just thanks for all the work you're doing for the basketball community. I know it's really appreciated.
Yeah, happy to do it. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, thanks, Brandon.